Well, good afternoon, and we'll get the meeting started. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Senator Berg. Senator Carroll.
Here.
Senator McDaniel. Senator Mills. Senator Neal. Senator Nemus.
Present.
Senator Wilson. Here. Representative Bojanowski. Representative Fleming.
Present.
Representative Graham. Present. Representative Petrie.
Here.
Representative Pratt.
Here.
Representative Tipton.
Here.
Representative Weber.
Here.
Mike Harmon.
Here.
John Hicks. Victor Maddox. Sharon Mattingly. Senator Higdon.
Here.
Representative Johnson.
Here. We do have a quorum, and we'll get our meeting started. Today's meeting was set aside primarily to hear bills that would be heard in this session. We have 3 bills on the docket. We will have another meeting on February the 13th at 1 o'clock. We have several bills that we had a couple that did not get on the agenda. The deadline was Thursday for that, and they got in late. Had a late call on those, so we have that, and then we have a couple that need actuarial analysis. So we will have a follow-up meeting on the 13th, and all the bills that have heard today, last month, and on the 13th are the bills that we will hear during this session. First up today is the Representative Tipton, and has to do with the Judicial Legislative Retirement Plan. Representative Tipton, the floor is yours, and please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Oversight Board. If you were here for the December meeting, I presented a proposed piece of legislation dealing with the legislator retirement system. That legislation has been filed as House Bill 114. There is actually the actuarial analysis for that bill has been completed. You can find that online. I point that out primarily just to point out the fact that it's a very small number of individuals that are going to be impacted by that. It's said that as of, let me get this figure here, as of July 1, 21, according to the LRP website, there were 43 members of the legislature that were in the defined benefit plan and 66 members of the legislature that were in the hybrid cash balance plan. So that bill, very similar to today's bill, would just transfer any of those members over from the legislative retirement plan into the KERS non-hazardous plan. It would not change their benefits. They're identical plans, so it would just be in the oversight of them. And I asked the question last month, should we also include the members of the judicial retirement system? Because again, we have a very small number of members in that. There are more than the legislature, but still relatively very small compared to all the members. Essentially what the impact of this would be, it's basically going to, proposal would be, and it could be a House substitute to 114 if we choose to go that route, but I wanted to get input from this oversight board. Any judge who's been come into service after January 1st, 2014, their account balance would be transferred from the legislative judicial retirement system plan over to the Kentucky Employee Retirement System non-hazardous plan. So at some point in time, when all the legislative members who are in the defined benefit plan and all the judicial members are in the defined benefit plan, all those benefits are paid out, we would no longer have that system. There would no longer be any need for that system. And the point for doing this is, do we really need a separate system for the legislators and the judges for a small number of people? And I felt for a long time that it was non-productive. I want to be quite honest for us as legislators. I think the optics of us having a separate legislative plan is not good to the general public, and there are a lot of questions that come out of that. Now, we're not changing anybody in the defined benefit plan. This would, just like I presented last month in House Bill 114, if we go this route, if I do this committee sub, we will just add members of the judiciary to that. It doesn't impact those historical members that are part of the DB plans. They would not be changed. They would not be impacted. We're not making any changes to those plans whatsoever. So I just defer if you have any questions or comments. Any thoughts on that? If it's a good idea, it's a bad idea, I've been here long enough, I can take it. Welcome any input on this suggestion or this idea.
Okay, we have any questions of Representative Tipton on this bill? Do you, Representative Tipton, do you have the number of legislators that are still in the legacy plan? I know in the House that number is very few.
The number that I read there from the actuarial analysis said I believe there were 43 legislators that are still in the legacy plan. Now, I'm not for sure if those are retired members. There are also maybe some current members who would qualify for that, so we might need explanation on that. That number does seem a little small, actually, to me. I suspect there are current members who would qualify for that legacy plan that may not be included in that number because they have not retired yet.
Okay. I see no questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And our next up is Deferred Retirement Option Plan, DROP, Representative Walker Thomas and company. While they're coming to the table, I'd like to recognize some new members we have to the committee. Senator Berg is new. Welcome to PPOB. Representative Bojanowski. Let me get that right. Bojanowski. Okay, I'll get it one of these days. I have it if I don't have to say it. But welcome to the committee. Also, co-chairman Representative DJ Johnson is new, Mr. Co-chair. Do you have any comments? Or?
Yeah, just very briefly, I'll limit my comments to less than an hour, if that's okay with you.
Go right ahead.
It is a pleasure to be back on PPOB. I've been here before. Had a little break, and I'm excited about being back here again. And generally speaking, I wanted to say how much I appreciate the work that's been done by this board and the different committees to start the process of getting our pension plans healthy financially once again. And it's been a tough road to go, but a lot of the good works that have happened have started in this board, and I look forward to continuing that. And I look forward to continuing the priority efforts to get our boards even more financially healthy. And that'll be my focus as a member of this board. And I look forward to it, Mr. Chairman. I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. We also have Senator Danny Carroll as new to the committee. Welcome, Senator Carroll. Okay. Representative Thomas, I guess introduce yourself for the record, and those folks at the table with you I guess as they speak, they can introduce themselves.
We can go right down the line in just a sec. Thank you, sir, for having us and getting us on such short notice. We wanted to get this topic out there. I'm Chairman Walker Thomas from District 8, and I chair Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection, hence my concern for these guys and girls that serve for us. So I'll let these guys introduce themselves, and then we'll kind of let maybe Brianna take the topic there.
Kevin Pletsky, Secretary-Treasurer, Kentucky Professional Firefighters.
Brianna Carroll, Director of Public Affairs, Kentucky League of Cities.
Sean Butler, Executive Director for the Kentucky Police Chiefs Association.
Brian O'Neill, Legislative Director of the Kentucky Professional Firefighters.
Mr. Chairman, a few years back, we had some of our officers in Hopkinsville, Kentucky, come up to me and say, guys, I'm looking at retiring here soon. Is there anything you can do to help or anything like that? Then one of them mentioned the drop program that's been used in other states. I think it's been around for quite a while. So I told him I'd look into it, and we kind of researched it some, and then mentioned it to the Kentucky League of Cities, and they said that was something that they've always been very interested in doing too. Since then, these 4 or 5 officers, including our chief of police, has retired. This is something that we were hoping that maybe they could extend their stay with us a little bit if we can offer something along this line. So kind of in a rough draft right now, but I'll let Ms. Carroll go ahead and explain it a little bit, and then we'll open it up if you all have any questions. We appreciate you at least taking the time to hear this in front of us.
We've been working on a DROP, which is a deferred retirement option plan draft with staff for almost a year, I think. And they vary across the nation in different ways. Some plans have been successful, some have not. And so one thing is, as many of you are aware, we have been on a long road to make the CERS plan on an upward trajectory. And so that's something that the Kentucky League of Cities is very guarded and wanting to make sure with our employee groups that we protect that and maintain the integrity of our system. And we are sensitive to in retention right now. We know that we have an issue with competing against private employers, and so retention is an issue that we are dealing with. And so, but it's not just on the hazardous side, it's non-hazardous as well. And so we are looking at, as we're drafting this bill, different options. We have a meeting this week that we're scheduling with the systems and some other people. But one thing we want to make sure is that it is neutral. There is some neutrality for our system, that the risk is limited. But that one thing that I know that the employees will want once they elect and they notify their employer of retirement, that there is a lump sum at the end of their retirement, so that when they continue to work at the end of their period, that there is some benefit for them to, when they maintain employment, that they have, whether it's 3 or 5 years, that they are able to have a lump sum at the end of that period as well. So I'll let them speak. But one thing I will point out too is when an employee maintains employment, they are still, even though they're considered retired with the for future pension calculations, they are still employees, so they still maintain health insurance benefits with the employer, and that was something that we've been working out to make sure that the employees have as well.
From the police chief's perspective, I think it's
Identify yourself again
I'm
for
sorry.
the record, please.
Sean Butler with the Kentucky Police Chiefs Association. I'm the executive director. From the police chief's perspective, the way we are looking at this, it's a retention issue. As I'm sure many of you all are aware, we are struggling in our field right now to get qualified applicants. And by the day, we're losing more and more qualified applicants. When I leave here today, I'm headed to Murray, Kentucky. The 12-year police chief of Murray is retiring tomorrow, and that's a wealth of knowledge that you cannot replace. But there's also on the patrol level and the mid-manager level. We're losing them everywhere. And I'll give you an example. In Covington, Kentucky last year, they tested 120-odd officers. They had 10 people that showed up for the test. That's what they had, and they pay well. And we are trying to look at just other options to enhance and see if we can get our people to stay in this field. And obviously, I agree wholeheartedly with Brianna. We want to make sure this is neutral. This is, we all want our pensions, and we want them to be solid, and that our objective here is just to give another tool in the toolbox to stop the drain of people who are leaving. And as Brianna said, we not only see this, we see this in the public works sector. I'll let the fire speak to theirs, but that is our intention here, and we really would like to hang on to some of these people who have 25 or 30 years in that are in the tier 1 or tier 2 that could maybe stay around a little bit longer and help us as we smooth through.
Once again, Brian O'Neill, Legislative Director for the Kentucky Professional Firefighters. The DROP program is something that we have been hearing about from our own members for many years. As Brianna alluded to, this is something that a lot of different states have some form or fashion of, and we've heard of some that have been very successful and some that have had to be changed. So certainly not going to try to hide from that. Yeah, some of the ones out there are not good. So we can use their experience to make sure that we draft something that's going to be useful, cost neutral to both the employer as well as to the state system, and beneficial to the members, just to give them another option. This isn't something that every person is going to jump on. But it's another option that can hold on to people. And we can only speak to, we have a lot of meetings of our retirees, a lot of gatherings. We have a lot of gatherings, as the chief mentioned, of some of just our current members. And we're hearing quite a few people that have left in the past 5 years that had they had this option, they would have stayed. As we've been kind of talking this up at some of our statewide meetings, I keep hearing that. It's like, gosh, I wish you had gotten that done 3 years ago because I would have stayed for that. And we're hearing the same thing from some of our members that are close to that retirement bubble. They're like, okay, what's going to hold me here? What's going to keep me? What's going to make me go? And again, we're hearing quite a bit. It's like, that'd be a great option. I hope you can get that so that maybe I can stick around, keep getting a paycheck, keep serving, keep doing what I've been doing and what I've been skilled and giving back to my community, but knowing that after a few years, I can have a little nest egg at the end.
All right. So that's kind of the outline of what we're looking at. We're still working on some of the details and got a world of knowledge up here at this table. So, Mr. Chairman, if there's any questions, we'll be glad to try to answer them. We realize this is still a work in progress, and we appreciate you taking the time. Hopefully, we will have something that's a little bit more finalized, even if it does need some changes towards when we go back next week.
Okay, thank you. I do have a. Would you mind explaining? You talk about successful plans and unsuccessful plans or bad plans. Can you kind of tell us, give us some examples of what's a bad plan and a good plan?
A bad plan would be one that has too high of a guarantee. So one like Dallas guaranteed, I think it was 8%. So when their employees, what they contributed, I believe it was 8%, which is unrealistic really to return. There are several plans that are, Ohio has a plan that I know our friends here like Arizona, Baltimore. We've looked at several plans that are successful now.
So what the plan that they like, what kind of return is it guaranteeing? We don't have legislation in front of us.
Basically the way we looked at it is, and to answer your question in a little more detail, Senator, on the bad plan, to us, a bad plan is anything that costs the pension system money or puts it in a negative light. We're trying to look at something that is a 0%. That would be it. It would be dependent on the market, and it also is a choice that you would potentially make as a retiree or if you decided to participate in the program. We don't envision that everybody would participate in this. We think it will be some, we hope. But, we strive to, every one of us that are Tier 1, Tier 1B, Tier 2, we all want to make sure the pension's solid. And I don't think there's any one of us that would want to do anything that would risk that, and that's why this has taken so long. And I, try to work on it to make sure that we have a plan that matches our system and that does what we needed to do without coming back and having any issues with the pension.
You might have mentioned this, and if you did, I'm sorry I missed it, but who do you envision operating this plan or overseeing it? Will this be with KPPA or where will CERS? Where will this be? So
that's a good question, and that is when you look at other plans, they run the gamut. We are having a meeting this week and to figure out the best way, because we don't want to add an administrative burden to anyone, and we want to make sure that it's good for the systems as well, for also the employee, to make sure that it's easy for them. Other systems have, as we've researched, they run through another administrator. There are several plans that have contracted out, so like a Nationwide or other programs, or their own pension system runs it. So it's across the board, and that's so we've designed. Right now we have a draft, but we're going to meet with the systems and deferred comp to see how we can make it run smoothly.
Also, I guess deferred comp would also be a consideration. What about the, one last question? I know we have a lot that want to ask questions, but these are the ones that were employee contribution and employer contribution. Where will they be going forward on this plan?
So I can tell you in the draft that we have, one idea hypothetically would be that you would send an employee contribution would go into their drop account. Employer contribution would continue to go into the pension system to pay down the unfunded liability, and the employee's pension payment would go into their drop account.
Okay. Thank you very much. Senator Berg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really apologize because this is my first meeting, so I'm going to ask a really, really basic question. Deferred retirement option plan. As, let's say, I am a retiring police officer, and I still have a couple good years left of me. I don't exactly understand what you're offering me here. You're offering me a way to defer my retirement and get a lump sum payment. How? I just start at the very beginning, 10 sentences. How does it work?
Want me to do it, or you want to explain it to your people?
I'll be glad to try to explain it. I'm not a very good 10-sentence person, so essentially what it would do is you would retire. Your pension would be what it is today. So say I retired, I had 30 years. My pension would be locked at that 30-year mark. My pension, at that point, I would stay on as an employee. My actual pension would go into a deferred account where I couldn't have access to it. And then at the end of whatever the term may be, 1 through 5 years, however you choose, however the bill is ultimately set up, then I would have access to my pension. I would start drawing my pension like normal, but those years that I was in the deferred program, that would all land in that, and that's where you would talk about a lump sum. And where we think that is kind of important, especially to our Tier 2 folks, is a health insurance fund.
You may.
Thank you, sir. So what goes, that's their own money being invested for them, and they get the return on that? I'm not sure how does that make you more whole? You could have taken your own money and invested it yourself.
So by having that option, so I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and drop, but I'm still going to continue to work for my employer for those 3 years. So I've got my salary to take care of myself, and it's essentially like a little nest egg that I don't think about that gets set aside into an account, whether it be a deferred account or a savings account or a mason jar that they bury in a field. That money sits there and builds, and I continue to work. So I still am, for my budget, I'm doing everything the same, not thinking about that money. And then I retire in those 3 years, truly retire, leave the drop program. And that nest egg that's been out there is then given to me.
So are we basically taking over the responsibility of being money managers for them? I mean, could they not take their own money, invest it the same way, and get the same return? That's my question. How is this a plus for them?
Because under the current system and the way the statute's set up, you could not. You would have to retire and you're done.
Yeah.
You're done. So I would retire. I would not. Okay.
Senator Berg, that was a very good question. I'm sure some people in the room and watching on KET were wondering the same thing. So very good question. Representative Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And kind of following along the line of thinking of Senator Berg, we currently have retirement reemployment options. And recently, during the COVID, we've shortened that 3-month period to 1-month period. Could you explain the differences between somebody considering retirement reemployment and this drop plan, and what the thought process would be about the benefits of which way to go?
The difference would be the 1 month, because you go back to work. But the other difference is if you're on a contract, you're drawing your pension and you're coming back to work and you're drawing the salary, whatever I come up with in the contract. Under this, you're not leaving, you're still drawing your salary, but that pension you don't get, it's set aside. You're not allowed to access that pension. That would be the difference in my estimation.
Sure, I understand that. Now, the individual would basically probably stay on in their current position at their current salary rank, or if somebody retired and was reemployed, they might come back in a different position. So that's another consideration. One question I just had, when you're accumulating this balance over a period of years, let's say 5 years, what are the tax consequences? Have you all looked into the tax consequences to taking that lump sum? Would the taxes be allocated on an annual basis? Or if somebody were to, for example, right now in Kentucky, we have an exemption of 31.1 per year. If somebody, is that going to be allocated for tax purposes on an annual basis versus if they took it out 5 years and they had a very large sum, there may be tax consequences there. That's just something you might want to look into and get some answers on that.
And we have looked at that. Essentially what it would be is you would have an option to roll it over to a 401k or whatever you choose under the federal statutes. Essentially be capital gains taxes. Because you're in a deferred balance account, and that we look at, that's going to have to be the individual's choice. But for the time you're in the drop program, it would operate just like deferred compensation, and you would not be taxed. You would have to make tax decisions at the end of that 5-year period, or 1 to 5 year, whatever gets passed. And
He's correct. And this program would be an option. You will, when you notify your employer that you want to participate and retire, you have a maximum. So in the bill, we want to make sure that we are providing a maximum time period. So I think what we were originally drafting was 5 years. Some states have 8 years, some 5. I think Ohio is 5, Arizona's 8. And so I think we were looking at putting 5 because you don't want someone to go on in perpetuity. So making sure that someone, but when I think you made a point about what happens to the individual, they aren't retiring and then where does that individual go in terms of employment? They continue in their position because they're still an employee. So I hope that makes that part clear, because it's not like they retire and then come back. They maintain employment. So it's good for the employer because they know when that employee is leaving, and they retain that employee. And it's good for the employee because they are electing to participate in this and in creating a lump sum account at the end of it where their retirement contribution or their retirement payment, pension payment, plus their employee contribution is going into the account for interest accrual.
One additional brief question, if I may, Mr. Chair. And I think you stated this, just to be clear, when somebody makes this decision, they're actually retiring. Their critical compensation is determined and their retirement benefit is determined at that time. So if they continue work and that position has an increase in salary, those increases in salary will not impact that at all. That's just part of their salary. But the retirement's based on their critical compensation based on the day they make the decision to retire.
correct. Yeah.
Senator Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean, remind me, when the officers go back after a separation, is there not any type of 401k that the departments
sir.
are offering? So
Well,
there's nothing?
Some departments, that's that's a choice by the citywide, but I'm not familiar with many that do that. Usually it's just, here's your contract, you're on a 1-year contract, you've got your pension, and we renew you annually. Now, there may be, Senator, there possibly are some out there that do that, but it's not the norm.
Okay, and do you all know what percentage of officers that retire go back, not necessarily including at the same agency or at another agency? Because I know a lot that's exactly what they do. And if the department they go back to does have some type of 401k, that's basically the same thing that you all are talking about. Correct?
Oh, I said, I think we would have to ask the systems that.
Okay. So there is a concern of how much this really would help, because the officers that are likely to go back are going to go back anyways. As an SRO, or if you're city going to the SO, I mean, you and I both know that happens a lot. And it would be nice to see those numbers, and also be nice to know what agencies actually offer some type of retirement for these folks that are retired and rehire. And, you know, with your pension, you can have it sent directly to an investment account every month.
And I agree, Senator. We're just trying to look at just as another tool. And you're right, you do see many that go back, but we are starting to see that pool dry up some too. You know, I can tell you in the northern region of this state, it's probably the same 30 officers that go out, and with the SROs. And we're not necessarily gearing this towards the SOOs, at least not in my estimation. This is going to be more for your rank and file, for your mid-level management and your upper management, all of those. You know, the SRO, as you know, is very specialized, and that's where we tend to see now the migration of the retiree rehires are going to the SRO positions.
And many of those SROs those districts we're seeing becoming police departments. So
yes, yeah, and that's a whole nother, that's changing too.
So I see what you're saying, and I see what you're saying also, that we really have to look at the numbers on this to make sure it doesn't hurt the bottom line for the system itself. And you know, in all my time, I don't guess I've really ever thought about this. Was this common back at some point within law enforcement across the country, or
It is now.
it is now?
It is.
And it has been for some time too, I believe.
And is there any data that helps support that it works that you all have seen?
I think as the newer programs, or those that were in the beginning as they were set up, there's backdrop programs. They failed. Those that were guaranteed a really high interest rate, those are problematic. Baltimore had a program that was closed, and then they reopened a program that is working now. So you've seen newer programs that kind of like what we are doing, that have watched those that failed and trying to create something in place that have safeguards. What we're looking at, we could either put something in place that utilizes our deferred comp system and has some of our the programs that they offer, or using something similar to our Tier 3 system, but having geometric smoothing in place that would offer neutrality.
But it always involves some guarantee of return? No?
Not necessarily. It depending on how the plan is set up.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Co-Chair Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, first I want to thank Senator Berg for asking the question I was going to ask, and she probably asked it in a much more coherent manner, so thank you for that. I'll just make a real quick comment, and we've touched on this a couple of times, but we've talked about this guaranteed benefit. And I would just caution you, if you think you have to put some kind of guaranteed benefit in, make sure that it works financially for the plans themselves. I think we look back historically over our pension plans, one of the major things that has gotten us in trouble was making guaranteed benefits without a clue what's going to happen in the future. I would hate to see us do that yet again with this plan. So please keep that in mind. I think it is just another tool in the tool belt for you guys. And any tool we can offer that doesn't negatively impact the plans, we should very seriously consider, and I probably would support this. But please keep that caveat in mind for me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Bojanowski.
Yes, thank you. Just kind of thinking, because I'm a teacher, so would this be a system that you could see would also work in KERS or TRS?
We're going to try it at this level if we can get it, worked out. We'd invite any other of the others to look at it also at that point. So
Okay. And just a very brief follow-up. Okay. So I'm very grateful for Senator Berg's question, and it helped me a lot because that was going to be my question. But what I don't understand is why would someone simply not retire and keep working as opposed to retire and then have this drop system?
You're not guaranteed that spot back, even though we have contracts. Say you retire, you're not going to be guaranteed your seniority back, and you're not going to be guaranteed that same job. This would keep you in place, and that would be the big
So
thing.
my question's a little bit different. So
Okay.
why would someone simply not keep working, like not retire? If they're going to keep working, if they think I'm going to retire and then work some more, why wouldn't they just not retire yet?
So really quick, one thing I wanted to add to what the chief had said. The police are the only ones that can retire and rehire. So any other professions are not able to do that. So that certainly might change a little bit. I understand that wasn't the crux of your question. But to your point of why not just retire? Some people will. Again, this is not for everyone. Quite a few of our members will probably, if it's time for them and they think they want to be done, they retire, start drawing their pension. But there are a number of people, and I can speak to, and actually this goes to one of the other questions earlier about some of the success in other systems. I can speak to the Arizona system, talking to the firefighters out there. A significant percentage of people will start really thinking about this drop because they want to work a few more years, and really they just want the option of that nest egg of drawing a salary, staying in their same position, like the chief mentioned, not necessarily leaving and having to find another job. And maybe they could find another job, but starting in a different aspect, and they get to keep doing the same thing they've been doing, continue to draw a salary and have that nest egg. And it's an assist a little bit to the management side, because as of right now, I can just speak for, I work for the Louisville Fire Department. We have 500 members, over 100 of which can retire tomorrow. And we don't know every year how many will. With something like the drop program, again, it's not for everybody, but at least they say they can look at those numbers and say, well, we've got 17 people in the drop that are leaving this August. And now it helps them to plan that they at least know some of the numbers, not all of them, but some that are going to be leaving.
Just for clarification, you talked about that police were the only ones that could retire and participate in this program, or to continue, or would it be eligible to, retire and then go to work at another job? That's any of the systems you can retire and go back to work. There's a waiting period, correct?
Correct. No, I was just speaking specifically to the retire and rehire in the same position, the same job, the same department. The police are the only ones currently that do that. The firefighters cannot, but firefighters can leave, wait that waiting period, and go get rehired at a different department. So that does happen sometimes, but it's a little bit different.
Okay.
But that doesn't deal with what we're proposing here.
Yeah. Thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Another question that I had, do they need to stay at the same job to qualify for this, or can, like you mentioned, going from a police officer going to an SRO, do you have to stay in the same position? Because if you're a police officer, that's that's not the same as a SRO. That's a completely different job.
What we're looking at, and again, I don't want to speak for the chief, but it would be staying in the same job, because really we're looking at this as a retention tool.
Well,
so if you've got someone, I can speak for the firefighters, you've got somebody who's a battalion chief, 25 years of experience, that decides to stick around a few more years, you want them to keep being a battalion chief. You want to hold on to that experience to keep them doing that profession. So that's what we're looking at, is retention.
And I would tell you that that's the same way the police are looking at it too.
okay. when you do this, is there any commitment that the retiree has to make, or as far as how long they will stay? Do they have to stay a year, or they do this and a few days later decide it was a bad call?
We there's typically when there's a minimum and a maximum, and we are looking at a maximum of 5 years.
So they have to commit for 5 years, or that's as long as you allow an individual to do that?
Maximum. Maximum amount of time, and you would have to state when you elect to participate into the drop program the amount of time that you are going to be in there. So if you say, I am going to work another 3 years, then it's 3 years or 5 years, but a minimum of 1 year up to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Oh, Senator Berg has a follow-up.
Thank you, sir. I'm still really trying to wrap my head around this from a financial perspective if I was the employee. And, I mean, it seems if we're going to keep this revenue neutral for the state or for whoever the governing body is, then you cannot offer more of a rate of return than what the market can offer. And what your job is to try to predict what that rate of return is going to be, make it a little bit less so that you make sure you don't lose money, a good bit less if I was doing the financial. I mean, for my purposes, I will not let my accountants go above a 4% annual rate of return because I don't want to put everything on that. So you can't offer a rate of return higher than the market. In fact, to be fiduciarily responsible, you really have to offer a rate of return that's going to be a little bit less. What is the incentive for the employee? I just don't get the financial incentive. They could take this same money and invest it themselves. We would not be taking that risk for them. We cannot offer them more than what we can get ourselves. So I just don't understand, how is this a win for them? Somebody just has to explain to me, if I was going to retire, which I am, I'm retired from University of Louisville, how does this make me more whole than I am if I just keep my pension and go back to work? That's my question. I don't understand that.
Well, one, I don't believe we're looking at guaranteeing any, I think that would be an issue with the system if we said we're going to guarantee you 8% or 5% or whatever. It would have to be 0% or as Brianna described, the incentive is I'm staying in my job, I'm still drawing my salary, and I'm setting aside a pension now, and I already have a guaranteed job, and I'm going to stay here, and I'm building a nest egg that I will have along with my pension when I retire. So my pension is still going to be there, and then whatever I put in the drop program, however that matures out or whatever the rate is, that's where you draw the nest egg. You could apply this if I retired and want somewhere else to work or whatever, but we're looking at it from the retention. It's more important to us to keep some of these folks where they're at, and that's kind of the way we're looking at it. I guess that's the only way I know how to explain it.
So in essence, it's a financial plan, it's a financial administrative tool for them. Yeah. They have somebody else able to administrate their pension, the money in that pension, for the 3 to 5 years that they continue to work for us.
I think I might be able to give you a scenario that would help. So say we've got employee A that makes $50,000 a year. They have the choice right now to either retire and no longer get that $50,000 and maybe stay home or maybe work somewhere else, but now they're going to start collecting a pension of, let's just say, $2,000 a month. What that employee, those are the only two options that employee has. They either leave and draw their pension, or they stay and they do not get that pension. This gives them the option to stay, continue to make that $50,000 a year, And while they're making that $2,000 a month pension now goes into an account to sit there for them. They can't touch it. They're still just going to continue to work, say 3 more years, making their $50,000 a year. And so everything is the same for their bank account. But then when they do retire in 3 years and start drawing $2,000 a month, there's also $36,000 that's now been sitting in this account. Hopefully, maybe it's built some, but maybe we decide to go the mason jar route and it's been out in the field. But you hand them that $36,000. Now they've got a nice little chunk of change as they go out the door. So it's just another option.
On top of their employee contribution that would have been that was going into that they were also contributing for their retirement account. That is going in there as well. And also note that as an employee, your pension, even though you're making $50,000, when you retire after 27 years, your pension isn't $50,000. If you retire at 20 years and you're making $50,000, yeah, it's not your full amount. So it's not always advantageous to retire right when you hit 20 or 25 or 27 years. So that's also something to consider as well.
Thank you, Senator Byrd. You made a comment that you could this give you an option to keep some. It sounds like when you said that you had the option if somebody wanted to stay, you could tell them no. That they can't, they couldn't stay. They couldn't.
That wasn't my intent.
Okay,
I didn't mean, if it came across that way, that's not, no,
Well, I
that's
guess
not what I meant.
I would have asked that anyway, but you opened the door. Do you know, if there's face it, if there's an employee that somebody doesn't want to keep, or they've been waiting for 27 years for them to quit.
Well, Senator,
Do they have the option of saying, rather you didn't do this?
no.
Okay,
No,
that's fine. I just wanted to ask that question.
Hopefully you would do your work and terminate them according to the law, and that problem would not be there in 27 years.
I understand.
Mr. Chairman, I was probably one of those officers with some of my supervisors.
Senator Carroll, I promise I wasn't talking about you. Auditor Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two small. One, is there an additional benefit to the individual from a health insurance, especially a family health insurance? Because can you have health insurance paid for the family as well when they're retired? So is there like an additional, benefit to the employee so they can maintain family coverage?
They are only considered retirement or retired for the pension calculations, but they are still considered an employee. So all of their employee benefits remain the same.
And that's what I mean. There's a benefit if you're using it as a recruiting tool, and people have a family on health insurance, because when they retire, they don't necessarily have health insurance for the whole family. Is that correct?
We're looking at this more as a retention tool.
Right. No. That's what I mean. That's one extra thing as a retention tool for them to keep family health care coverage. That's what I'm saying. And then the other question is, in any of these other states that they've used this particular program, have they looked into the possibility of rolling these funds into a SEP or something to when they're done, they're not paying a bunch of taxes on it? Is that...
So yes, there's an option. There is an option. You can elect to take it as a lump sum, or you can elect to roll it over into an account for your.
So as they're going along while they're waiting, they can go ahead and roll that into a SEP as they're working those years.
Yes, you can do that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Auditor Harmon, this is an interesting look. I've never sat here and looked up at you. Usually I'm up there looking down while you're testifying. So.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you all. Appreciate you being here today. Senator Mills is up next. We're going to talk about fiduciary duties and ESG proxy voting issues and why he's getting settled there. I know a lot of retirees were concerned about Representative Graham's bill being heard, and that will be on the agenda February the 13th. And he'll be prepared to present it. Senator Mills, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for being late today at travel issues, but I'm here, so I got here just in time. Before I get started, I really want to thank Jennifer Hans Black for all the work. If you haven't worked with our state government staff and PPOB staff, they do a great job of really making a complicated issue more understandable, and I want to thank her for that, and thank Brad as well for those things. My bill today, I know you don't have anything in front of you, but we've been talking, or I've been looking at ESG issues over the last couple years. It's a big concern to me to make sure that all of our pension funds, when you roll everything in, all the funds that we have under management, it's a big dollar amount. We want to make sure that all of our pension funds are being invested with the pensioners' best interest in mind, and that there's not other mixed issues that come into the investment of these pension funds. And my bill today is going to do, or that we're talking about today, will do two different things. It will clarify who a fiduciary is, and it will also require oversight of the voting shares or proxy votes, gives some oversight to proxy votes. So let me explain to you real quick. A fiduciary is really three things. It is someone who must act in the sole interest of the members or the beneficiaries. A fiduciary must act for the exclusive purpose of that member or the beneficiary, such as maximizing profits. And a fiduciary must act with the care, skill, prudence, diligence of a prudent person acting in that capacity under that circumstance. I believe what we have is a mixed bag of who is a fiduciary and who isn't a fiduciary. So my bill, which, by the way, is going to be 68 pages, and I'll be happy to get this summary out to everybody on the committee as well. My bill is going to require the clarification of who a fiduciary is. So three things that it will do. It will amend statutory language to require conformity and ensure all necessary parties under the fiduciary duty to the system are under fiduciary duty to the system and its members and beneficiaries, including as fiduciaries are trustees or board members, investment committee of the board, investment managers, advisors, and consultants, and any other person who is a fiduciary that's defined throughout this bill. It's going to apply for all systems to provide that fiduciaries act in accordance to federal and state laws, require fiduciaries to acknowledge their fiduciary duties in writing, so in other words, in a contract, and prohibit any waiver, restriction, or limitation of their fiduciary liability by contract or agreement. So in other words, they can't waive the fiduciary duty. For each system, it also will define what a fiduciary is, a person who is appointed, employed, engaged, or otherwise under board action. A fiduciary is going to be who exercises discretion and authority and control over the management of a system, the management of disposition of the system's assets, or who renders investment advice. And it will specifically prohibit the consideration of ESG factors as contrary to the fiduciary duty owed to a system and its beneficiaries. So that will kind of level the playing field across all of our funds to identify who is a fiduciary and what they have to do, and they have to act in the best interest of our pensioners and our system. The second thing that this bill is going to do is address proxy and proxy voting. As you know, when you own a lot of stocks and investments, you've got a lot of votes that take place, and our pension systems employ proxy companies that vote proxy votes, and we want to make sure that they are voting with a fiduciary interest at heart. So the question is, what is a proxy? What is proxy voting? I'll just kind of explain that. Proxy voting by state retirement systems occur when the system, as an institutional shareholder or publicly traded company, delegates its voting power to a representative to enable its share vote to be cast in its absence. Each of Kentucky's systems use proxy voting services and provide some of the capacity for these proxy votes. But there's no consistent or statutory approach, and proxy voting services are not necessarily bound as fiduciaries by the law right now. Systems have voting proxy policies in place, but the policies are subject to change. So in other words, they can change from proxy voting company to or organization to organization. So the second part of my bill will require oversight of the voting of these shares. It's going to require the board to adopt written proxy voting guidelines consistent with the fiduciary guidelines that were outlined just a few minutes ago. Before a board may adopt recommendations of a proxy advisor, it's going to require a proxy advisor to acknowledge in writing its fiduciary duty and commit to following the board's adopted proxy voting guidelines. It's going to require all shares owned by the system be voted according to the board's adopted proxy voting guidelines. And finally, it's going to require transparency by reporting proxy votes to the board of trustees of each system at least quarterly, and publicly on their system post those votes on the website. So as you can see, basically we're trying to just close up any loopholes, any openings related to proxy voting and who represents us and who's making investment decisions to make sure that they're not using any other ideology, no other mixture of ideology and financial management. We're just talking about numbers, dollars and cents, to best provide a return for our pensioners.
Thank you, Senator Mills. We have a few questions. Senator Berg has the first question.
Thank you, sir. ESG, I asked around environmental, social, guidance, government. What's the G?
Yeah, environmental, social, governance. And
governance.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are trying to make sure that we have no ESG in our pension plans.
Correct.
Okay, sir. So as you were speaking, when you build an argument, you build it on certain premises, certain basis. And I had a big disagreement, honestly, with one of your premises, which was that maximizing profits is the only responsibility of a fiduciary. You named it as one of the three basic tenets of what a fiduciary does, is to maximize profits.
Right.
All right, now, so I'm
return.
Maximize return, which is profits. I'm an extremely wealthy woman. I have a lot of fiduciaries working for me.
Right.
And with my money, my goal is not just to maximize profit, but to make sure that my money is not supporting bad causes and not being used to support things that I think are wrong. Okay? I have that right as a personal person to tell my fiduciaries that they have, that is part of their fiduciary responsibility to me.
Right.
You're taking away that right?
Well, I guess my answer would be, as an individual, just like what you said, you have the right to guide your money. But as a group, as a pension fund, that individual right is, it needs to be the right of the pensioners as a whole.
Not the oversight board? I mean, they can't speak for the people they represent?
Well,
You're saying no, you're not allowed to?
Right.
As a group, we decide that we don't want to invest in Russia, even though profits are soaring. And you're saying, no, because profits are soaring, you have to invest in entities even if it is not working for your own good?
I'm saying that the pensioners, that we're trying to get away from making decisions based on environmental, social, and political ideologies, and be more focused and laser focused on return. It's not, this focus on social governance in investment funds has just been rising over the last 10 or 15 years. And it is causing pensioners' money to be invested in ways that does not maximize their return, in my opinion. And I think in a lot of people's opinion, that's what's occurring. These ESG investment portfolios are not returning what regular investment portfolios are.
But God forbid they're not funding wars in other countries. I mean, this is a two-edged sword.
Yeah.
It goes both ways, and I can't believe you would want to take that choice away from the people whose money this actually is.
Senator Berg, you have a
Thank you.
question?
Okay, thank you.
Auditor Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, appreciate you bringing this particular bill. I'm very familiar with the issue. For those who need a little primer on it, I would encourage you to just Google "Our Money, Our Values" to take a look at it. Some of the biggest concerns that I've seen, of course, right now, and I'm sure you're familiar with this, President Biden and under his administration is actually changing the fiduciary rules on the federal level to actually allow for ESG investment and not to the investment of the fullest extent to maximizing those. From a state, our state law already requires to invest as a fiduciary, but I appreciate you bringing this to clarity. Will your bill make sure that our rules supersede the federal guidance on this?
That is the goal. That is the goal, and we just have the bill drafted, and we'll make sure that occurs.
Well, very good, and I appreciate that. And it's important. A lot of people forget, when we're investing, or our state is investing, it's the retirement plans, but a lot of people forget that if the pensions, as we have seen time and time again, if the pension investment fails or does not produce sufficient revenue, the people that the taxpayers end up picking up the difference. Right. So if someone wants to invest their own money for ESG, I'm all supportive of that. Right. But when it comes to investing the pension plans and those retirees who are dependent on this, and the taxpayers that are dependent on not having to continue to fund a pension system, then I think your bill is very good. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Bojanowski.
Yes. Can you give an example of a decision that has been made that was not in the best interest of the members? And then just to kind of follow up from that, how do you disaggregate what a decision that may have, say, an environmental impact? How do you disaggregate the environmental aspect from the fact that then may end up leading to higher returns?
Well, I don't serve on the board, but we're giving policy. We're setting policy for the boards to follow. And so, a lot of these questions are around environmental issues right now. Some of them are going toward social issues as well. But almost any stock that's invested in, petroleum, fossil fuels, wind, solar, are all ESG type investments that may or may not give the best return for our pensioners. So we want the stock to be, the investment to be evaluated by the return that it gives, not by some social or environmental score that is a part of the decision to buy or sell a trade. And then we're giving guidance to make sure that the proxy votes, the people that are voting on our behalf, aren't making those decisions in that way. I don't have a specific, targeted stock or trade or anything of that nature. But if you read investment news, 30 to 35% of the investments are ESG type funds, and they're more and more heading that way. And as Auditor Harmon said, the federal government is actually even impressing that on investments. So I just don't think that it's the best interest to our pensioners to evaluate and put another set of standards into investment other than return on our investment.
May I
Kinda
ask
plain simple.
for a quick clarification?
Yes.
Do you have any examples? Has this happened already, or are you just predicting that it might
No,
happen?
it has happened. I'll be happy to try to dig up some, but I don't have any in front of me. We have to.
Okay. Chairman Tipton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Senator Mills, for bringing this forward. And we do have a copy
Oh,
of
good.
your legislation,
Okay.
so we have it. And I want to reference page 1 in line 15. And I think this is the crux of your legislation when it comes to fiduciary responsibility. I'm going to first read how the existing language and statute says. It says, starting there on line 15, the board members, any investment advisor, shall discharge their duties with respect to the funds of the retirement system solely in the interest of the members and beneficiaries. And your language changes that to board members, any investment manager, advisor, or consultant, or any other person who is a fiduciary as provided by this subsection. So all we're doing, and you're talking about the proxy voting, where there are people who are taking proxy votes on behalf of our retirement systems. And you're just saying they have to follow the fiduciary responsibilities that are in the best interest of the members and the beneficiaries of a retirement system.
Yes.
And when KERS non-hazardous is funded at 18.4%, and we have the billions and billions of dollars of unfunded liability, I think this is an excellent idea that we impress what a fiduciary responsibility is. As a licensed real estate broker, I have a fiduciary responsibility to what's the best interest in my clients.
Right.
Sometimes I have exercised that to the financial loss to me, but that's all right. It's my fiduciary responsibility, and we're just trying to impress that all these people have a fiduciary responsibility to do what's best for our members in the retirement system.
Yep.
Thank you.
Exactly. And we're not saying that that's not happening. We're just saying that we want to make sure that it's consistent across all of our funds and that this is very clear. This is from PPOB standpoint, from the legislature's standpoint, this is how we want our investment. This is how we want our proxy votes to be handled.
Thank you. Auditor Harmon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Mills, I was going to give you one of those examples that was requested.
Very good.
Basically, BlackRock used the proxies available in their portfolio to basically take over or have a large number of Exxon board members
That's right, yep.
that they worked to divest from, guess what? Oil exploration, which is their primary source of revenue and their primary goal of their company. So that is one example of using the proxies in a manner that is negative towards that particular investment. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Senator Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no other business, we will be back here on February the 13th at 1 o'clock, and we'll have several more bills on the docket to discuss. Motion to adjourn.
Second.